Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 64 of the Beginner to Master Speedrun. So this is my third or fourth day in a row recording episodes, so I hope you guys are enjoying the more frequent content. Coming in, rated 2076, so inching my way closer to 2100. And yeah, hopefully we'll have another instructive day of chess. Let's hop into the first game. Okay, first opponent, playing Harmonicus. We have a Queen's Pawn opening, and going for the Queen's Gambit declined. Opponent's playing very quickly. This is all very common opening theory. In this position, there's a few moves. There's Bishop f5, there's Bishop e7, and then there's Bishop d6. I'm going to play Bishop d6. Is one of my main lines of choice recently. And it's a more aggressive way to play against this variation. Rather than breaking the pin, which is more common, Bishop e7, I do develop the bishop more actively. And hopefully we'll see why the bishop can be happier here. There are some potential traps, but of course it depends how white develops. Usually white will play knight f3, knight e2, or sometimes queen c2. I'll play rook e8. And one of the main traps here is if white castles, I can take on h2. And then if king takes h2, knight g4, and win back material. So white has to be really careful. And I've had a lot of title players walk into this. But yeah, maybe my opponent is already sensing some danger. Plays bishop g3. Yeah, that's a more safe, more solid move. Generally against this move, it's totally fine to take. And yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and take. Even though I'm allowing white to open the file for the rook, okay, white takes back with knight, that's also playable. Maybe after the game I can go into more depth what I would do if pawn takes. For now, I'm going to go for a5. And this is another idea in this line is to develop the knight to a6. I play a5 first because if takes I can take back with rook. And with knight a6 I do discourage queen c2 because knight b4. And if white plays a3 then I have the path knight c7 to e6 and sometimes eventually to g5. Where then I can migrate to the king side. Rook c1, so I do have this option, but then bishop b1, and the knight would probably get kicked eventually with a3. So I'll go for knight c7. And I'm holding off developing this bishop just because it doesn't have a great square. Like bishop g4 gets kicked with f3. But for the time being, f3 is not quite possible for white because e3 would be hanging. So maybe white wants to play f3 next. Very common in this line, white goes for f3 and eventually e4. So now I have a choice. I could continue with 96. And that's looking to make the most sense. Yeah, let's play 96. If white plays f3, then, I mean, e4 is not an immediate threat because d4 would be hit. So we'll probably have some options. And we're definitely approaching or entering the middle game. I mean, we're both developed and castled. Even though this bishop isn't developed, it can probably enter the game later. There's some cases where the bishop develops on the queen side and then I go for c5. Even sometimes like b5, b4, bishop a6. And this is a structure, at least against Queen's Gambit, I've been playing for many, many years. So over the years, I kind of have built up an arsenal of ideas of what to do for black in the middle game. With bishop to b1, yeah, that's a sign that maybe white wants to create the battery. But this knight's guarding h7, so it's not a big concern. b5. b5 definitely makes some sense. There's another idea here to play g6 and then h5 and try and harass this knight. I'm going to start with g6. It's actually one of the downsides with a knight on g3 is it can very easily be restricted by a pawn on g6. And maybe just eventually get kicked with h4. So doing fine on time. And time's about level. I guess I should also note another idea with g6 is to eventually play knight g7. And let's say I do kick this knight away, then I might have the idea to eventually play bishop f5 to trade the light square bishops, which is definitely a goal for black in this structure. White's going for b4 probably. Okay, I'll go for h5. Yeah, b4, b5 would be the minority attack. Very common for white to try and poke holes in my queenside structure. I mean, if b4, I probably don't mind taking, opening the file. I could even maybe play b5 and create this sort of pawn chain, fix the pawn on b4. But there's also the idea of just playing on the king side. If I get to play h4 and then h3, it might lead to some attacking potential. Weaken white's king side. So white goes for b4. I'm going to take and play h4. A simple tempo move, I should say. Gaining time on the knight. Knight f1. h3 makes a lot of sense. And then even to follow up with something like knight g5. I'm not scared at all about losing the pawn. If takes, then knight g5 would hit this, and f3 is a potential hole. And if g3, then I probably still go for knight g5, threatening bishop g4. Wow, white plays queen f3. So leaving the pawn tension. Knight g5 comes with tempo, but then queen g3. Oh, there's a nice line. Knight g5, queen g3, knight h5. And I think that traps a queen. Yeah, let's start with this. My knight's defended, so I don't think I'm blundering. And actually, if queen g3 or queen f4, I think this move is lights out for white. Because the only safe-looking square is h4, but that walks into knight f3 with the discovered fork. I'd be hitting everything. And basically, I mean, white's in big trouble already because if these moves lose a queen, then the queen probably has to retreat, which walks into takes, and the minor pieces are beginning to just coordinate really well. So this whole plan of maneuvering the knight from b8 to a6 to c7 to e6 to g5, I think it's all paying off. I think it's very rare to have a game where I'm up on time by so much. So white plays queen e2. Yeah, that's probably the best try. And I'll take... I mean, there's still potential for some really nice lines. King takes immediately. And now something like bishop to g4. And it's actually very close to checkmating. Like if the queen moves somewhere, I play bishop f3, king g1, knight h3 checkmate. Of course, if f3 I take and win the queen. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is force mate, bishop f3, and this is mate in 1. If king g3, then knight h5, king h4, and then move the knight somewhere, probably knight e4, king h3, queen g7, king h4, queen g4, checkmate. So yeah, should be mate in just a few more moves. Yeah, it looks like we might see this play out on the board. Actually, oh, knight f2 is it's not quite mate because it's defended. So yeah, I'll probably just go for queen d7. And unfortunately for white, yeah, these pieces are not helping defend the king. Oh, g5 is mate, actually. Yeah, let's play g5 checkmate. Okay, got the pawn mate. I think that gives me a Rosen trophy. Pretty nice game overall. Hopefully an instructive example of how to play this variation, but also how to attack in the middle game as black in the structure. We can go back, I can show some more details about the opening. I discovered this line a few years ago. There's a fellow international master, Casa Corley, who played this back when it was very, very rare. And he had some really nice wins over grandmasters in this line. I think there's a video on YouTube where he goes through one of his nicest wins. I also have many videos on my channel playing this line where I also just am crushing out of the middle game. But yeah, we went into one of the common positions, and it's more common here for white to play queen c2 and stay flexible. But bishop g3 is also totally fine. I will note, yeah, as I mentioned, if castling, I would take on h2, take knight g4, and this is crushing because I'm hitting the bishop, I'm hitting the king, and if king g3, then black has g5, trapping the bishop, and yeah, the king is not so happy on g3. So yeah, bishop g3, it's a safe looking move. And after takes, it does maybe appear more natural to take with pawn to open the file. But one of the ideas for black is to eventually put the knight on g4, either now or later. I think right now is totally fine. And the issue for white is this knight can't easily be removed because there's no pawn on the h file to play h3, and f3 just loses the e3 pawn. And meanwhile, it's not so attractive for white to castle because this can walk into the eventual attack with queen g5 and queen h5, and there's some issues for white covering h2. So yeah, so this is a useful idea to know if you ever get this structure, just having the knight on g4, and if white tries to castle queenside, it's also not so easy because the king is tied down to defending f2. I'd probably go for a5 and look to play the same sort of plan. But what happened in the game after knight takes g3, I think, yeah, we saw just one way to complete development, maneuvering the knight. And yeah, pretty quickly, my attack just appeared on the king side. I think starting with h5, and white probably didn't handle this well. Like b4 is already a big mistake according to the engine. Engine actually says white should play an interesting prophylactic move here, pawn h3. And even though this allows pawn h4, it prevents h4 followed by h3. So I'd probably still go for this. But this position would be a bit more solid for white. It's a bit more difficult for black to actually crack the setup with the pawn here. But as we saw in the game, after I got my pawn to h3, and then, yeah, especially after queen f3, this is a very feel-good position. And just to show, if queen g3, knight h5, the queen is trapped. If queen h4, knight f3, checking the king and winning the white queen. So yeah, what happened was not much better for white. And yeah, not every day I get to play G5 checkmate. So nice game to start the episode, up to 2083. Let's keep it going. I'll do another. Okay, next opponent, playing Rossolimo. And I'll play e4. We have a Sicilian. Knight c6. What do I want to do? I'm going to play knight c3. Let's stay flexible. I'm not sure if I want to go for open Sicilian. I think with g6, I'm going to play a delayed Rossolimo with bishop to b5. And this is not a line that I'm super deeply prepared in, maybe compared to the last game, but it's very solid. I do concede the bishop pair, but I'll get some very stable setup and hopefully just have a playable position going into the middle game. I play h3 to prevent the bishop from developing actively, and I think I'll start with bishop to e3 here. Just attack the pawn and castle. So nothing too crazy yet, but yeah, things could definitely heat up as we enter the middle game. Bishop a6 is interesting. It might signal that black wants to play this, but I mean, c4 is met with d4. So I don't think I'm too concerned. I might start with a4 here. Because there is the positional idea of eventually playing a5, try to weaken black structure. Black goes for c4. So now I can play d4. Not quite seeing black's follow-up. It just seems like black gave me the center, this pawn's a bit overextended. The bishop's not so happy just staring into the pawn, so it does retreat. And if c5 might be coming, but then I have d5. And there's also the idea to maybe go after this pawn. Knight e5, knight d2, even queen e2. Queen e2 might be the simplest. Okay, so maybe black, if I play queen e2, black plays b5. And if I take, diagonal opens, and yeah, maybe it gets messy. So can I start with pawn e5, knight d5, and then queen e2, but then takes in b5? So it's not super simple. Okay, how about this? How about queen e2, b5, e5? Queen e2, b5. Wait, queen e2, b5. Let's say I take first, takes, and then b5, and then pawn e5. A lot of different move orders to consider. I think this might win a pawn though, because the knight's attacked, knight d5, and then I take. Let's go for it. I mean, it still looks very solid on the surface. Black returns the bishop to a6. Okay. Well, now b5 is not really a threat because I take and hit the bishop. Can I play this move? I mean, even this move is interesting. This actually looks really interesting. Pawn b4. Pawn b3 as well. But then pawn c5. Also considering this. Just attack the pawn. Okay, I'm going to play knight d2. b5, so I can take. Black's playing very quickly. They may have missed that my rook was attacking the bishop. So bishop takes. And now I think I can get away with taking, but there might not be any rush. But why not? Yeah, just takes. And then I'm ready to take the bishop. Maybe. I don't see how black can punish me for this. Like, even though I'm walking into a pin. There's just no immediate way for black to add another attacker to the knight. And even if black has 2 moves in a row, I have the move b3, just as a safety move. So queen to d7. Yeah, I want to take. The taking is probably playable. Takes and then knight d2, saving the pawn. Let's do it. There's also knight e5 hitting the queen. And knight e5 might be stronger. Let's say queen b7, f3. Knight d2 might just be safer, though. Yeah, I'm going to play knight d2. I think the knight on e5 maybe would get exploited somehow. So the center is well defended. Pawn c3 looks very safe. But it's still a matter of patience. I do want to keep improving. f3 comes to mind. f3, knight h5. Is it that scary? And then queen f2. I'm going to play f3. And the main point is I over-defend the pawn, so I want to mobilize my knight. Use these squares on the queen side. And even though I do weaken myself a little bit on the king side, I don't think it's that bad. g4 is likely coming next. Even with queen here. g4, I guess g4 does allow this. Maybe I could play this move first. Winning connect 4. But completely shutting down any life that the bishop has. And also shutting down this diagonal for the queen. g4 was threatening to trap the knight. Black played bishop f8 to allow for knight g7. But this looks really, really good. I'll play g4 and probably just start pawn storming. f4. f5 is likely coming. I think we'll probably see e6. But after e6, I have knight e4 and yeah, ready to enter f6. So f5 is an interesting try. Yeah, actually f5 makes a lot of sense. If I take, the knight takes, g5, position closes down. So en passant might be the best option here. Like en passant and then f5 myself. Yeah, still takes work. f5. I'm playing f5 to at least give my bishop some life. I'll take back. I mean, the king is a bit more airy, but so is black's king. Probably rook e1. Yeah, my opponent's playing a lot more quickly. I liked my position a few moves ago. Now it's definitely getting a little bit more murky. I have to watch out for bishop g3. Yeah. Yeah, this is actually tricky. Maybe queen g2 first? Queen g2, king h8. About bishop. bishop h6. Really have to watch my time too. Takes. Okay, I think bishop h6 is okay. Not the move I really want to go for. So bishop g3, I take the rook and then play queen g2. King h8. Okay, I have 94 now. Multi-purpose. Attacking the bishop, guarding g3, attacking the pawn as well. King definitely wants to be here. Queen should be here. Probably want to shift over to the G file with my major pieces. That makes sense. I think I'm just going to simplify. We'll trade queens. Maybe not the best approach, but I'm up a pawn. Makes sense to go into the endgame. And it's just so much easier to play, especially with the time situation. Try and bring my king up. I do have 94. Maybe start with this. Let's start with 94, actually. I pressure the bishop. Rook g8, I can play king f3. There's no rook g3. I'll challenge the g file. So this should be enough time to win, but yeah, you never know. I take, and then this move. And the plan is to probably get the pawns rolling. I have this move now. I also have this move. Yeah, this should be pretty clean. d6. I think with d6, actually, let's start with this. And then d6. And my king is guaranteed to get to d5. And now I'll start cleaning up. I probably don't need to take the pawn. Okay, opponent resigns. So good fight. Yeah, I thought that was just like much better after winning the pawn in the middle game. But my opponent resisted well. I think there was a bit of a momentum shift when my opponent played f5. Like, it still should be good for white, but the structure changed and wasn't easy. But we can go back, take a look at the opening. But yeah, my goal with this opening was really just to get a solid position, good piece harmony, quick development. And I think my opponent just kind of went wrong with this move. Doesn't look like a great positional transformation for black, where white takes the center. Bishop doesn't have a clear purpose. I think it's more common, usually in these positions, black goes for e5, like queen c7, e5, even sometimes knight d7, e5, and then I know there's some middle game maneuvers in the structure where the knight goes to f8 and then e6, and someday to d4. But yeah, maybe my opponent didn't quite know what to do. And yeah, Engine says white's like close to winning. I mean, just a clean pawn extra. I'm curious to see if I missed anything obvious. Yeah, f4 is fine. Okay, in this position, the Engine does not quite like en passant. It says the best move is pawn d5, which I didn't consider. I guess the point is I'm just gaining space. Like if e6, I play d6. If rook t8, I have the skewer with bishop to b6. Also prevent knight e6. Okay, that's fair enough. I guess I can see how this is strong. On the surface, it looks a little bit overextending. But what I did in the game, yeah, position opened up, Black got some initiative. I think everything was always under control, though, especially after the queen trade. And yeah, the conversion was pretty smooth, using the d-pawn, using my king. So, okay, another instructive game, up to 2092. Maybe the next game will take me over 2100. We shall see. Let's do another. Okay, taking a little bit longer than usual to find a game, but we do find one, playing Mindsetter from the Philippines. And okay, I'll go for my usual Sicilian knight c6. Maybe, okay, I don't play against a Rossolimo, but I play against c4, which is an attempt to play d4 and get a Marazzi bind. So against this, I think there's a few options. I mean, e5 is playable to clamp down, and then we both have control over each other's d5 and d4 squares. I'm going to go for pawn e6. I think is another option. White going for bishop to b2. So I'm wondering if I can get away with this. Not to mention, okay, queen f6 doesn't work because knight c3. But knight f6 attacking the pawn. And if e5, knight g4, bishop b2, queen c7, queen e2. Do I want to provoke craziness? Let's do it. Let's put the ball back in white's court. We might just see knight c3. And the idea is to try and prepare this d5 break, which I think I can play right away. d5. I mean, d5, e5 is still not entirely clear. I mean, I really want to disturb white's setup. Okay, let's go for d5. So there's 3 defenders, 3 attackers. We might see a big trade on d5, which I don't mind. Then the bishops can develop pretty fluidly. I guess white does have bishop c4 in the end. Tempo on the queen. I mean, I have queen e4 check. Sometimes it's a mistake to play such a check, but I think in this case, it makes a ton of sense. Because I'm preventing white from castling. And white either has to play bishop e2, or, I mean, queen e2 or king f1 would maybe not be so attractive. So we do see bishop e2. Now, can I really start making threats like knight d4? Knight d4 prevents white from castling. If takes, I take. Hitting the rook, rook b1, bishop f5. Let's go for it. A strange opening. I feel like I'm violating some opening principles. White very quickly castles, sacrificing the bishop. Maybe blundering the bishop? I mean, I can take with check. And bishop g4 is coming. And white's going to try and win back the knight. There's a really beautiful line here. Bishop g4, d3, queen takes f3. Takes and then checkmate. There's some other lines like knight here. Okay, white goes for rook e1. I mean, now I take. If takes, it's checkmate. If I want to be fancy, I could take the knight with my queen, but taking with bishop just seems way more straightforward. I'm threatening mate in 1 with bishop takes g2. Okay, a 13 move win. Yeah, final position is just lost for white. I'm up 2 pieces and having a mating attack as well. So pretty quick game. Quickest game in recent memory, actually. And hopefully this goes to show like a nice way to counter such an opening. I mean, sometimes if white can develop without any issues and eventually get in d4, it can be a nice positional bind for white in the middle game. But in this opening, I went for the quick d5. Center opened up, and yeah, according to the engine, white should play queen e2 here, just offer the queen trade. I would have been happy to take. And a big problem for white is the structure. White is having the isolate queen's pawn, and I have full control over d4. Bishop g4 coming, I think, would be quite pleasant for black. And what happened in the game, yeah, it got bad for white very quickly. White could have taken, though. According to the engine, this is close to equal after takes. Okay, I was only looking at rook b1. Bishop a3 is the best move, apparently. If rook b1, I have queen e4. I was calculating bishop f5, but queen e4 hits the rook and the pawn, and black is doing well. But anyway, what happened in the game? Yeah, just all crumbled for white. Just to show this line, if d3, then the best move by far is to sack the queen. Oh no, my queen, but if white takes it, it would be checkmate. So, okay, I think we'll end it there. Hope you guys enjoyed the games today. Definitely had some fun ones. If you have questions, leave them below, and I'll see you guys soon for the next episode. Stay tuned.